This is the video for the RVLINK long-range system for the RVOSD autopilot. So when you buy your RVLINK, this is what you get. This is the RVLINK transmitter. From 420 to 450 megahertz. UART port, PPM S-bus port, and power port. The UART will be used in the future for bidirectional communication from the ground station to the autopilot. So you'll connect this to your Android phone or to the computer, and you can send commands to the OSD to update waypoints mid-flight. CPPM or S-bus is for your receiver, so you connect your standard RC FR Sky receiver, PPM or S-bus here, and it acts like a relay. And the power is from 2-cell to 4-cell LiPo, and there's a low battery alarm built in, a loud beeper that beeps when your battery is low, and an SMA connector for the antenna. It comes with a omnidirectional antenna. So you want to, this is usually how we run it, just vertical. Okay. In this bag, this is the free LRS receiver that you get when you buy an RVOSD. So this is the receiver. But to use it, in order to use it, you must solder it to your RVOSD 6. These are the antenna adapters for the receiver. There are 2 ports on the receiver, but so far we've only activated 1 in the software. So there's no diversity mode, only a single antenna, which connects to antenna 1. And this dipole is for the receiver. It's like this. And you can come here and look how it's installed in the finished product. Like this. Oh. And I found a receiver, so this is how, this connects to the PPM. So if you're using a PPM receiver, you have to set the failsafe position as you usually do in the RVOSD. So you set the failsafe position above a certain point so that when you lose radio link, it triggers return to home. If you're using a newer receiver with the S-bus protocol, then when you lose signal, it automatically detects that. You don't need to set any failsafe positions. But that's really easy to check. You just turn off your remote and you make sure that it goes to return to home. So that's the ground station. So now I'll give you some tips how to solder the receiver board to the RVOSD. So we don't need this. I use a flux pen so the solder flows better. Take this off, take the antenna off, I don't need it. Put a little flux. So I just make sure it's aligned on all four corners. Start with one. You have to be careful not to rub the tip of the soldering iron to the pads of the receiver, because there's small traces that connect to the pads that are easy to tear if you rub the soldering iron. So if you can get a close shot with this, I just dab the solder onto the and let it flow. I don't rub. The side pads are need a little bit more heat because they're grounded, so the PCB absorbs all the heat. Yeah, the ground pads, these are the ground pads. You don't have to be as careful because there's no small traces and they're redundant. So now you'll connect your antenna to antenna 1 port. Just align it and push down. You get a spare shrink wrap with your LRS kit. You can put it on and shrink wrap it, cut it out. And then the next step is to update the firmware on the OSD. Well, actually you can do the update before you put the shrink wrap, it's easier. So I'll show you how to do that. This is the new, let's say, I guess OEM updater. Instead of the Picket, we now use these because the Picket has been discontinued and these are cheaper. So you use this to update the firmware on the microchip. This is the Picket program that you can download to use this update tool. And there are two different firmwares. One for the main board, this is the main board, and one for the graphics board, which is the top. You see, this is one microcontroller and this is another microcontroller. This one does the OSD and this is the autopilot, and the rest of the autopilot and all the computational tasks are done there. So you need to update two different firmwares. So this connector is marked. So the colored wire is pin 1, and the square pad with the arrow is also pin 1. So you want to match the colored wire to the square. That's the orientation. Like that. You go File, Import, and then import your hex file. Program. Tools, check communications. Sometimes, because I'm using a virtual system, I have to plug and unplug. Okay. File, import the hex. Then I import the hex file. And I write it. So just hold it, apply some pressure, and you wait for the writing to finish. You don't need to apply power when doing this. And if you do apply power, then the Picket software should detect that there's power and not send power through this connector. That's automatic. So I do it without power connected. That's the safest way. Now we're doing the bottom board, which is the sensor board, the main board. So it's a different firmware for that. We call it main. So you're going to see an M in front of the file name. And then we write that. Okay. So now we can connect it and see what we get after updating the firmware. This wire is the video output. It goes directly to the screen. And then we have a CMOS camera. Okay, so on the screen, power up. This screen is called the locked screen. So in order to unlock it, you have to request that Range Video sends you an unlock code. So to generate this code, you have to press this button menu three times while aimed at the OSD. There you go. So I pushed that button. Now I have my ID. You send this ID to us and we give you a code, and you enter this code here. You just enter it, and if you enter it correctly, the OSD will unlock, and the next step will be binding your UHF transmitter to the receiver. So we'll do that next. Alright, now I'll show you how to bind the RVLINK and how to change any settings in the RVLINK. So there's a little button where it says bind. You have to push down and then you apply power. And that flashing power indicator means that it's in bind mode. And then you go into the RVOSD menu and you select transreceiver configuration. And you can change the settings here for the transreceiver for this one and for our receiver. So I want to change the frequency to 440 megahertz, and I want to increase the power to 27 dBm. And then to apply these settings, you have to bind it again. So you go to bind main, and then you hit menu on the remote, and that saves those settings. So then I would like to save configuration on the OSD. You always have to save anytime you make any settings changes. You save, and yeah, that's it. Click menu again. I'm out of the menu, and we can go for another flight.